So now it's time to clean up all of our unused code, and I've kind of pushed this into a separate lesson because there's quite a bit of code that we're going to clean up now that we've introduced React Router. And we've got a lot of conditionals, if you like, where we set a piece of state to display a particular component on a page. And what we'll do is we'll just step through all of these particular warnings and remove them from our code and just make sure everything's good before we move on to the next section. So I'm just going to start with the activity details page and just open this up. And we've got the props that we're not using from our activity store, the open edit form and cancel select activity. So they can both go. And then in our activity dashboard, we've got a number of things that we've imported that we're not using. So let's go and take a look at that. And the activity dashboard. And we can remove these imports. And what we can also do is remove our activity store in its entirety from this particular component. So I'm just going to remove both the edit mode and activity and the use context for our activity store because we're not actually using it anywhere inside our activity dashboard anymore. And that means I can also remove the use context as well. So it doesn't seem that long ago our activity dashboard was this massive long component that was acting as a middleman for just about everything. And now all it's doing is just displaying a simple little grid and our activity list. And let's go back and take a look and see how we're doing. I'll just refresh the page again. And we'll go to our navbar. And we've got our link and our activity store inside there that are not being used. So we'll head to the navbar and we'll just remove the link. And also we don't need our activity store in here either, so I'll just remove this as well. And then I can remove the activity store import and I can get rid of the use context as well. And let's see how we're doing for warnings. And now I can just remove the select activity from activity list. So let's head over there and remove this from the activity store destructuring. And if I go back to my console, it should be clean now. And indeed it is. And I'll just click around a few places, make a change. And that looks good. But what we also need to do, because we've got some state inside our activity store, we'll also remove the unused state. So I'm just going to open up the activity store itself. And let's take a look at what's going on in here. So we have our observables. Now we don't need the edit mode anymore. So we can remove this. The activities array we also are not using anymore, so we can also remove that as well. And we are using the rest of this, but let's take a look down. We need our activities by date, we need our load activities, and our load activity. We're using the clear activity and the get activity. And in the create activity, we're not using the edit mode anymore, so let's just remove this from here. And the rest of this can stay the same. In the edit activity, once again, we don't need to keep the edit mode in there, so that can go. The delete activity is fine. And then we've got our open create form, open edit form, cancel selected activity, cancel form open, and select activity. We don't actually need any of these anymore because we're browsing to our different components by routes, and we don't need to control their opening and closing via this state anymore. So we can remove all of these, and let's just get rid of these three as well. And that's a bit better. Let's just make sure our application is still working. And sure enough, we've got some things that we also need to clean up because we're using some of those props inside our activity form. So let's head over there. And the cancel open form is what's highlighted as an error. And we've still got another error somewhere, so let's just take a look at this one. And we're using it inside our button here. So what we need to do when we cancel the form open, instead of using that inside our activity form, what we want to do is push the user back to our activities page. So what we'll do is we'll say history.push, and we'll just send them back to activities in this case. And let's just make sure this has fixed that problem. And if I create an activity and click cancel, I just go back to the activities list or our activities dashboard. So that's fine as well. There's just one thing I want to clean up actually inside here. At the moment, we're loading our activities when we load our app. And if a user comes into our application and I refresh my application on the home page, then what I'm also doing, and I'll just open the MobX DevTools, on this particular page, what I'm also doing is loading the activities here. Now, is this the best place to load our activities? Well, not really, because if the user browses somewhere else without actually clicking on this link, then we've wasted that trip to our API server to go and fetch back these activities. So we don't really want to do that in our app components. And a more appropriate place to do that would be our activity dashboard or the activity list itself. Now, because our dashboard contains our activity list, it contains our, or it will do later, it's going to contain our activity filters. What I'm actually going to do is add this into our activity dashboard as opposed to our app component. So what we want to do is actually take all of this, including our loading component, and we want to move this over into our activity dashboard. And I'm just going to cut all of this and open up the activity dashboards. And I know we've just reduced this component's responsibility to almost nothing, but let's put it back in. And I'll just need to bring in the extras from React. So I'll need to bring in use context. So I'll get this and use effect as well. And this import never works. So I'll just add this one manually. And I'll say import activity store from, and we'll go up to our app and stores and activity store. And we'll also need to bring in our loading component as well. And we can go back to our app component, and I'll just remove the imports here. And I can also remove use context and use effects. And let's go take a look and make sure that nothing is broken by that little activity. So I'm loading my activities, and if I go to my home page, then nothing happens, no activities are being loaded. And if I go to my activities page, then we see our loading indicator and our load activities takes place. And no errors or warnings in the console. So we're making progress. Our application is starting to feel more like an application, although it could do with some styling, because obviously this looks pretty awful, unless you like really big images of the Louvre, but our site isn't about that, and we want to make this look and feel a lot better. So in the next section we're going to look at styling our application, so it looks a bit closer to the end product of what we're going to be producing here. But for now, because we've finished this particular section on routing, let's go back to our application and we'll go to our source control tab, and let's go ahead and stage and then commit these changes. And this is the end of section 8, and I'll just press control return and then push these changes up to GitHub. And what we'll do is we'll have a summary before we move on to the next parts.